cool tree. This is another chestnut. We've actually had some decent luck growing. There are blight-resistant varieties of American chestnut that aren't necessary. They don't have to be the hybrid. There are people who've been growing resistant varieties of American chestnuts, our native chestnuts. The hybrids are crossed with Chinese chestnuts, but they're still very edible.
How long does it take to have the fruit?
Probably 8 years, maybe 6 to 8 years before you'll start getting some. But these trees will live to be hundreds of years old.
Would you want to prune it so it stays short, or do you just kind of let it go and go back and climb it?
This, I would think of the chestnut as the canopy. So they're going to get to be nice and big and tall.
So you don't want to like prod it, just let it go.
Yeah, you'll have to hire local youth to do the picking for you. Climb up the trees. So that's going to be a canopy layer. So we'll have the then we'll have the next layer. This is the American persimmon. A very delicious tree, delicious fruit. Those are a little bit like medium size. They're similar to an apple tree, probably a standard size apple tree. So they're probably going to get a little bit bigger than this semi-dwarf. So that would be like a medium layer. These are white peaches. So those are going to be a little bit smaller fruit tree. So underneath the persimmons, underneath the apples, maybe about the same size as the apple trees. And then we're getting into the shrub layer now. We have a really good diversity of medium-sized trees, and these are aronia, or black chokeberry. These are they produce a blueberry-sized, like dark black berry that's really high in antioxidants and vitamin C. Super nutritious, great for making juices and making pies and jams, and great for making wine as well. So it's called chokeberry. That's the common name, but aronia is the scientific name. So these will be in our shrub layer. These will grow to be about 5 or 6 feet wide and 6 to 8 feet tall. So they'll become nice bushes. Oh, I forgot one of our other great trees. These are honey locust. So these are nitrogen fixers. These will grow to be some of the big trees in the middle of the open area at the top. You see they have really long twisted pods on them. Those are honey locust trees. So these will get to be great big canopy trees as well. But all of their leaves that fall every year will add a lot of nitrogen to the soil, and their roots will also fix nitrogen. So they'll be helping with our goal of having self-grown fertility here.
I just want to see if we can allay the misgivings of certain members of the audience here regarding honey locust, just because so we can get a more positive
At least like in a manicured more type of a neighborhood, they're considered kind of a nuisance because they drop so much.
Yeah.
And the leaves are very hard to rake because they're so little, and then the pods are so big and prolific. I mean, they're just dropping a lot of stuff. I don't know, like in your manicured garden, it's not really a tree.
Well,
people
forest
are
garden
seeking
is
out.
pretty much the opposite, in my opinion, of a manicured garden. In a forest garden, you want to have a lot of diverse habitats. You want it to be pretty rough and clumpy and haphazard in structure. So you want to have piles of sticks and branches that can be habitat for different types of slugs and insects and food for other animals. You want to have piles of leaves and straw and and it's not meant to be a park like atmosphere. It's meant to be something that provides a lot of living space and food for beneficial animals, and you know, it's meant to look and feel a lot more like walking through a wild forest, a natural forest, than a park or something that's well maintained and neat and tidy, because things that are neat and tidy tend to not be self-maintaining and they require a lot of work, and so that's kind of the reason why I think it's a really good tree, because it does contribute so many of those resources. Like the seeds can be eaten by animals. I just think they can be used as mulch trees as well, where honey locust or black locust, we have a lot more black locust up in Wisconsin where we are, which people consider to be invasive because they spread. But if you cut them and use them as mulch, like when they get to be 8 or 10 feet tall, that's called coppicing. You cut them off at the stem and use that as a mulch, a fertility source. Instead of fertilizer or getting wood chips or manure from off your site, you're growing it right there, and then the tree resprouts. And so you're maintaining it as kind of more like a bush instead of letting it grow up into a great big tree and get out of hand. So you could manage it that way too, depending on what your goals are.
I have another question about this whole, I don't know, different layers. It seems like it would shade out other things, you know, like all the competition. So if your honey locust is your biggest tree, then how is my dwarf apple going to thrive underneath, you know, a big shade tree?
Excellent point, and that's where spacing comes into it, and where you have to plan out. You have to envision what this is going to look like when these trees are mature. So, like if you look in here, you can see these. Everything is getting to be starting to compete. You know, the branches are starting to grow into each other. There's some competition for, you know, the feeder roots of those trees are about as wide or maybe a little bit wider than the edges of the canopy. So that's where the shallow roots are going out. So if you imagine those trees, their leaves are starting to touch, that means their roots are starting to compete for nutrients in the soil as well. So you want to avoid that. So that's all about laying out your garden, doing good site planning, and you know, this is a dwarf fruit tree, so it's going to grow to be about 15 or 20 feet. So we need to space out. We can put shrub plants closer than that, but we don't want to put any other trees within 15 feet of it. So at first it's going to seem pretty open. So a lot of people who plant food forests initially will clear the area and plant a lot of annual vegetable crops, things like pumpkins, you know, ground cover plants for the first couple of seasons. And then once things start to, the trees get a little bigger, start to shade out the weeds, then you can just mulch it completely and let it go.
And one of the nice things about honey locusts is there's a lot of sun that comes to them because they're not very wide, like leaved. And you can also thin them out, and they don't really have that much like little sprouting. So they're actually a perfect tree for having light come to and take nice.
So now that we've got our shrub, a couple of candidates for our shrub, then our herb layer and our root layer are a couple of the other ones. So these are some perennials. This is a thyme, so that's a good perennial herb for our kitchen. This is lemon balm, so that's another really good one. These are aromatics, so anything that you would use as a seasoning in your kitchen is excellent for planting in your orchard because it confuses pests, and it's also things that like deer and rabbits don't really like super strong smelling things. So if you have a nice carpet of thyme, here's some oregano. These get established and start to spread around your garden. It's going to confuse pests that are looking for like your fruits, that they're going to damage your fruits, and it's also going to deter herbivores. Got some sage, and these are perennial onions. They're called walking onions because they grow up, and they're nice green onions that you can chop off and use like scallions. But they produce little onion bulbs at the top of their plants. And then when they get mature, they fall over and plant themselves like that. So they'll just spread themselves by walking and tipping over, and before you know it, you'll have a carpet of onions, and you'll
Who
have
designed that? That's a good
more
design.
onions than.
Gosh, thank God.
There's element analysis.
And this is just one
Walking onions.
example. This isn't looking very happy because I just dug it up and it doesn't like to be dug up right now.
Comfrey.
But this is horseradish. So this is a really nice root crop. It'll still grow. They're very hardy, and once you have them, you have them. You can't get rid of them. But luckily they're delicious, and they're a dynamic accumulator. These leaves normally, this is a kind of a young plant, but next year these leaves will get to be like 2 or 3 feet tall and nice and wide. It looks like a tropical plant. And then every fall, at the end of the year, when the leaves start to die, you can dig it up and grind up the root, and it's really nutritious. It's in the mustard family, so it has a lot of anti-carcinogenic values to it, like the same way that kale and cabbage and other mustard family plants do. So those are kind of the different layers that I would suggest putting in here. This is another apple. It's kind of like a wild apple seedling that came up from seed, so it's probably going to turn into not a really choice eating apple, but it could be a great pollinator. So the more crab apples or things, or you could let this grow another year until the stem's a little bigger, and then take a branch off of this tree and graft it onto here. Grafting apples is really easy and fun thing to do. So I think it would be good to I wanted to talk a little bit about sheet mulching, but maybe we can kind of start to spread these plants out, because we'll plant some of these trees in the next couple of days. So I would say these are the herbs. This could be divided into quite a few, so we can plant these right in the understory here. But so where do we want to put? Does somebody want to spread out and put these locusts somewhere? These are going to get to be really big, so they should probably be like 40 or 50 feet away from other trees.